What's going on, everyone? My name is Talmadge, and today we're going to be going over how to create your very own Lightroom presets. Chances are, if you've watched any photography videos at all on YouTube or any kind of filmmaking photography YouTubers, they've advertised their own LUT pack for their signature look. And obviously that's a pretty good product to get into as a photography YouTuber. But today I'm going to teach you how to create your very own LUTs in case you were ever curious as to how to do that. It's actually a pretty simple process within Lightroom that I just discovered through trial and error, trying to figure things out myself. And while I'm by no means an advanced LUT creator, I do know how to create the basic LUTs and maybe some of the principles that you'll need to know within Lightroom to be able to do so effectively. Also in this video, I'll go ahead and give you guys a quick basic rundown of how to edit a photo in Lightroom, and at least what I do to edit my photos. So that way you're at least familiar with the program if you haven't done anything with it at all. So first, obviously we're here and we're within an album, which I have no photos in right now. So go ahead and click add photos and drag in 4 raw photos. These are compressed raw from a Sony a7 III for those of you who might be wondering. So here we go. We have all of these files. As you can see, it's just like a little bitty waterfall I took the other day. As you can see in these images, we have a lot of brown tones. We'll go ahead and work with this one because it seems to have the most color. And as you can see here, we have like a lot of brown and gray, a little bit of green, but yeah, mostly brown, and maybe a little bit of blue in the water right here. So the first thing I usually like to do with all of my photos is I'll go ahead and go over here to this point curve, and I'll just create like some little markers on pretty much every single one. Basically, this point curve kind of increases your contrast on the right hand upper side. If you raise that up, you're bumping highlights bottom, bumping the shadows, and then the very bottom little bit you can kind of crush the blacks, and so you give it like this little effect right here. Which some photos, like, it looks good with some, and others it looks absolutely horrible. So it just depends on what you want to do. I'll do like a little bit for this photo, and then a lot of these I like to make like an S-curve with them, just to give it a unique look. Kind of makes it, I guess, more vivid. And the cool thing about this is once you get your basic S-curve done, it's gonna look mostly normal, except for if I went to an extreme on any, single one. Like, I forgot to bring this one down. See, now it looks mostly normal. From here, you can take this and you can just do little tweaks to the S-curve to essentially give you a really interesting, almost color grade onto your image. So interesting edit. So as you can see here, like, it brought out a lot of the blue. You have a lot of the green showing up. So if I go over to blue, you can see I kind of lifted it a lot. If I wanted to pull that back, you have more yellow in the highlights, that sort of thing. Anyways, moving on now, we have the color mixer. I know we're talking presets here, but I want to give you a rundown of how I kind of edit my photos, because basically a preset is just a stored edit that you can essentially copy and paste with just a click onto any other photo, rather than like Command C, Command V, or Control C, Control V. So in this sort of edit, I might see, okay, there's some greens. And since it's the winter time, I want to give my greens less of a yellowy look. And so I'll go here, and you can actually take this little dot thing right here, and you can go look for specific colors, and it'll automatically take you to the correct thing. So maybe I want my like this green to look a bit more blue. Go over here and it shows me the actual green tab. I can kind of make it cool looking. So that changes the hue, which is like the color of the image. I could go over here and I can desaturate it a little bit. The luminance changes how bright it is, as you can see on the screen here. So like, I don't really want these that bright, so I'll maybe drop it down a little bit. And then obviously we have a lot of like brownish, which is kind of in the orange. So you can turn those red if you want. And it mostly affects the pine straw in this image. We really don't want it yellow. We really don't want it completely red, but maybe we want it like a bit red tinted, just a little bit. You could go over there and you could increase the saturation too, so it really makes it look red. And then if you get off of this tool, you can kind of zoom out and see the effect it has on the whole image. You see there's too much red in the foreground, so we're definitely going to want to bump the saturation down a bit on that. Now maybe going over to the blue, you can see we have some blue right here. Basically, when you're editing with this color mixer, it's easy to just crank a color to see where it's at in your image, because sometimes you might not have a color in your image, but in this case we have blue. So with this blue, we're able to see, okay, this is all the areas that if I mess with blue, it's probably going to affect. And now we'll take this back, and maybe we want to leave it at like 0, but we want to change the hue of the blue to a bit more. And you can see by the waterfall, you can see the hue change. So maybe we want to change it just a little bit over towards some more aqua color, desaturate it just a smidge as well, and then drop the luminance. or actually take that back. We'll make it brighter so it kind of stands out. Now that we've pretty much done that, you have the effects bit over here. I don't really mess with the color grading as of yet. I haven't really. Although I probably should, just because it's kind of a module I'm not experienced with and I really haven't had use for it yet. We can go into texture and you can crank texture, which just kind of makes that really detailed. You can see that, and then boom, it just kind of pops everything. Same thing with clarity, but it's a bit different. It almost like texturizes your image in a different way. And sometimes what's cool to do is you can bring down, say, texture and crank up clarity. So it's almost like an inverse effect, or you can bring up texture and you can crank down clarity. Now, you're not always going to want to crank it down all the way or all the way up. Dehaze is an interesting one. It can really alter the look of an image. Like if you do, say that, you know, it's going to look way different than if you crank it down like this. It's going to make it look a lot more dark and moody, at least in this image. So vignette is something I really advise you to be pretty careful of when you're making LUTs, because you can choose to have your vignette included, and that may not always be what you want. So the more things you include that you might not always want in your LUTs, the more things you're going to have to go back and be like, okay, I don't want that, and I'm going to change that. So it's just more steps. The more universal you can make your preset apply as like a good base grade, the better. The same with LUTs in video editing. You know, you have your base grade and then you can go from there and change things. So I kind of try and keep, if you're making it for a preset, try and keep it pretty basic. Test it out across a few different images. You might find certain images work good with it and certain images really don't work good with it. For example, with a few of the presets I made, I kind of went crazy with it. It basically was just copying edits from one picture to another, and they didn't really work very well at all for faces. I had to do a lot of modification for that. So in the future, you know, maybe don't do that. You can enable these things like lens correction, which I really don't like how that look ever. Remove chromatic aberration. I really don't notice that necessarily. And now we're pretty much done. Sometimes I will come back here, and if an image is like way too dark, I'll, you know, mess with the exposure. But usually I like to do most of my light work through the point curve. As you can see, it's in sort of the same category. I feel like I have a little bit more control with it, and it just makes things a bit more interesting to do it that way. So now to create the preset, all you gotta do is click on presets over here, and Lightroom will have a lot of different, like under the basics, of all kinds. They're like recommended presets, which analyzes your photo and then says, hey, we recommend these community presets. So for example, it recommends like all these different little looks, which honestly, I don't like any of them at all. You have premium, all these are paid, but then you have yours and you have user presets. And these are some that I've created. As you can see, they really alter the look of the image, especially this cold steel one I actually almost like for this image, but I find orange and blue falls is probably the one I've used the most. And you have a few test presets that I made earlier when I was prepping for this video. So to create your preset with the current look you have, all you gotta do is click the plus and just name it like my preset 1. You can put it in the user presets group, or you can make a new group if you want to do that as well, if you're making it for a pack, because maybe you really know what you're doing, which if you're watching this video, honestly, you probably don't. But if you do, that's awesome. Unless you're just a loyal subscriber, in which case, awesome. Thank you so much for watching my video, even though you know everything already. So here is a really important section that I really didn't pay attention to when I first made my presets, and that is, what are you going to include? So the light section, that's kind of your exposure, your point curve, etc. You have your color, which is like your color switcher, color grading, white balance, that sort of thing. You have the effects, which as you can see, texture, clarity, dehaze, vignette, grain. A lot of these, like grain and vignette, I really don't like to include in the final image. Now, texture, clarity, and dehaze, I usually will. Vignette and grain, like I said, I recommend not doing that if you're making a preset, or you can just go in here and unselect it like that if you do have it for a specific image. Detail, I usually don't mess with these when I edit my photos, so that's completely up to you, obviously. Everything is really up to you. We have optics. I include these because, again, I never really mess with them besides checking the remove chromatic aberration, which my camera doesn't really have, I guess. Not that I can really notice. So then we save this as, say, my preset 1 in this group. As you can see, now we can go to, say, this other photo that I kind of liked. So we'll go with this one. And we can throw on my preset. And as you can see, we have some issues with it. So obviously you need to do some fine tuning, but just to go over sort of the process. Another little bit I might recommend with your presets is not changing your white balance in your presets, because that can really throw some stuff off. For example, Rocky City, which is from a Rock City shoot that I did a while back. As you can see, my white balance is really on the cold side. And so that kind of messes my image up. If I was to apply that, I have to go down here, and then I can really bring back the natural look of my image a bit more. But for now, we'll go to my presets, and I'll show you some of the things you might have to do to correct. So obviously this image is differently exposed. You see the highlights are kind of blown out. So you might want to, like, say, pull the highlights back and then lift the shadows, because most of the subject of the image is within the shadows. So obviously you're going to want to lift it a little bit so you can really see. Other than that, most of this was exposure. You could, change this and just drop that so you really get maximum detail there. You can kind of go through and see like, okay, see the preset completely applied on this one. And this one as well, because it's pretty much the same photo. And that one, we'll go back to the first one. And again, it pretty much applies. The only one that it didn't was this, because it had so much of the sky in it. It really was blowing out the background. So you want to keep that kind of thing in mind. Okay guys, so that is it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed the video and found it helpful on how to create your very own Lightroom presets. If you did, please feel free to drop a like down below and comment if you found it useful or any other videos you would like me to make, because I'm happy to make any videos that you guys want to see. All right guys, that is it for today's video. I hope you found it helpful. If you did, please feel free to drop a like and subscribe to the channel down below. Be greatly appreciated. Help me hit my 100,000 subscriber goal in 1 year. Honestly, I think that's fairly impossible, but with your help, we can make it happen. Also, comment below if you have any thoughts about Lightroom, if you like Lightroom, or if you use another photo editor. I'd love to know and hear your thoughts down in the comment section below. I'm Talmadge, and I'll see you in the next video.